For half a decade, Penn State fans and probably Penn State's administration and football team were wandering, thinking, when can we finally have a whiteout game against an opponent that we shouldn't be beating by multiple touchdowns? When can we host Ohio State or Michigan or a top 10 team, a national championship college football playoff contender? When can we finally get the whiteout against that team? Not against Iowa, not against a 500 Auburn team, not against a Minnesota team who started 8th in Kaliak-Manis at quarterback. No disrespect. When can we finally have that? Not against Washington, who was to travel coast to coast and wasn't all that good last year. Well, finally, the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness is over. The whiteout game is back, and Penn State's going to be playing in it against Oregon in September. That is Penn State's first game in Big Ten Conference play is against Oregon in Week 5 out of the Week 4 bye. And that's going to be a 7:30 p.m. kickoff on NBC, prime time. You're going to have the fireworks. You're going to have 100,000 plus angry Penn State fans ready to have a cathartic release in what will be a very cathartic release if they do end up beating Oregon. And what I want to do is talk about why this is significant, why it's good for the sport, and also celebrate the fact that Penn State finally broke the Big Noon kickoff curse. Ohio State has yet to break that. I think to a certain degree, Michigan has yet to break that. They just broke it at times last year because they weren't all that good. But Penn State, at least for this season, has finally broken said curse. Their biggest home game of the year, at least what's likely going to be their biggest home game of the year, you never know until you get there, until the end of the season arrives, will be the whiteout game against Oregon. Before we go any further in the video, though, I do ask you to do a few things that are totally free. Subscribe to the channel, and more importantly, like the video and watch it all the way through to help us get into the algorithm, and also hit the notification bell so that you can get notified when I talk more about Penn State football, Oregon football, or anything related to college football, the Big Ten, top 25s, SEC, Big Ten, ACC, Big 12 predictions, the like. We do everything here on College Football with Sam. As much as I can handle, I talk about. This is special to me, so I wanted to talk about it. Comment your thoughts below on this matchup and the environment, the new environment, because some people expected this to be a noon game. And while we heard last year against Ohio State, the Penn State crowd come alive at noon, we heard it in the playoffs as well against SMU, it's still not quite the same as getting the whiteout at a 7:30, 8 p.m. kickoff. It's 7:30, but I think past games have kicked off at 8. Maybe I'm wrong there. So comment your thoughts down below, and last but not least, check out the links in the video description, especially the Discord server, where if you join that and navigate to the hashtag YouTube mailbox channel, you can ask me a question, anything relating to college football, and every Wednesday night I answer a few questions from that mailbox. So if you ask a question right now, since it's early enough, it'll be made into a video before the season kicks off. Anyway, though, thank you for listening. Thank you for your patience. Let's talk about the significance of this. So I said since 2020, because in 2019, they played Michigan. Michigan didn't end up being a top 10 team, but it was still their biggest home game of the year. So it was just by circumstance that Penn State in 2019 didn't play a top 10 team at home all season long, and Michigan was their best opponent. In 2020, they played Ohio State, but that was during the COVID-19 pandemic. So ultimately, there were no fans in the stands. There was no whiteout game for the first time since 2003, when the whiteout wasn't even created yet. I mean, you go looking at it from 2019 and beforehand, Penn State always played their biggest game of the year, what they anticipated to be their biggest game of the year in terms of opponent quality, dating all the way back to 2011. They played Alabama, number 3 Alabama in 2011 in the whiteout. They played number 9 Ohio State in 2012, number 18 Michigan in 2013, Number 13, Ohio State, and eventual national champions in 2014, took them to overtime. Played Michigan in 2015, finished 10-3. Played number 2 Ohio State and beat them in 2016. They went 11-2 and reached the playoffs. Played Michigan, finished 8-5, but at the time was ranked in 2017 at home. And Penn State's home slate that year ended up not being very tough. Their best games that year were Michigan State and Ohio State on the road, and they lost them both by a combined 4 points. In 2018, they hosted Ohio State, lost to them by a point. They went 13-1 and won the Big Ten. Ohio State did that year. And then Michigan 2019, that epic game with the, famous like kind of sky cam view, and then Michigan gets a delay of game called on them because it's just so loud that the snapper can't hear Shea Patterson, just can't hear him clapping, can't hear him trying to snap the football. So, I mean, that was epic. Michigan went 9-4 that year, weren't a top 10 team, but still, toughest home game on the schedule. And then in 2021, I mean, Michigan was a much bigger game that year than Auburn was. At the beginning of the year, people didn't quite know that, but at the end of the year, it was pretty clear, and you'd probably rather have the whiteout game against a conference opponent than a non-conference opponent. But I understood the reasons for that. It was historic that Auburn and Penn State were playing an SEC Big Ten game. In the non-conference. Don't know why it took me so long to say that. But then in 2022 and on, it gets really ridiculous. They played Minnesota in the whiteout, despite the following week hosting Ohio State. Thank you, Big Noon Kickoff. Ruined that. In 2023, they hosted Michigan, who was the preseason favorite in the Big Ten to win it all, and tied with Ohio State to win the Big Ten. Instead, their whiteout is against Iowa. Iowa, of all teams. And that Iowa team almost finished with a negative point differential, despite being 10-4, because Penn State beat them 31-0. Michigan beat them 26-0. They lost to Tennessee 35-0 in the bowl game, and then Minnesota beat them 12-10 in a very toxic fashion. And then last year, they played Washington in the whiteout, the week following a home loss to Ohio State, where they could have used the whiteout because their previous losses to Michigan and Ohio State at home have all been by single digits. 9 points in 23 to Michigan, in 24, 7 points to Ohio State. In 2022, at one point, Penn State actually led in the football game, 21-16, but then Ohio State ended up finishing out and winning 44-31. So closer probably than the final score indicated for much of the game. Could have used the night game, but Ohio State finished out in control. And then in 2021, Michigan beat Penn State 21-17, I believe was the final score. So, yeah, a lot of close games that maybe a night game could have tilted the outcome a little bit. I don't know if Ohio State loses to Penn State back in 2016 if that isn't a whiteout. But alas, that's the current rules of the Big Ten and its TV deals, that Fox gets the 3 primetime slots. Sounds like this year they selected all Ohio State games, the game as is customary, and then Ohio State versus Penn State, and definitely Texas versus Ohio State. So this was probably the 4th slot, the 4th best slot in the eyes of Fox. And while I kind of disagree with that in a sense, I think this game's really important, and Oregon and Penn State are big brands, and the whiteout is just amazing. I think that at the end of the day, well, that ultimately saved Penn State. Ultimately. Gave him an opportunity to schedule a whiteout against a top 10 team for the first time since 2018 against Ohio State. For the first time in several years. To give a little bit of an early look ahead to this matchup before we close out here, I do want to say that while Oregon beat Penn State 45-37 in somewhat of a Penn State home game last year in the Big Ten Championship, Penn State finished the season ranked ahead of Oregon and FPI with a 21.4 differential from the average college football team. So Penn State was 21.4 points better than the average football team last year, and Oregon was only 20.9 points better. When you look at ESPN's efficiency rankings, Oregon was just barely ahead of Penn State. Oregon was 5th, Penn State was 6th. Oregon's efficiency rating was an 84, Penn State's was an 83.7. You look at their resumes, Oregon was 5th in game control, Penn State was 8th, and they weren't that separated in terms of average in-game win probability. They weren't. So Penn State finished ahead of Oregon in FPI, and you look at Bill Connolly's early preseason S&P Plus rankings, Penn State is viewed as 27.7 points better than the average football team, Oregon only 24.7 points better, and the fact that Oregon has to travel multiple time zones over and Penn State is playing this game in the whiteout at home means that Penn State, according to Bill Connolly's post-spring S&P Plus rankings, should probably be favored by anywhere from 7 to 8.5 points, just maybe giving Penn State a few extra points or half points for the whiteout game and then for the extra travel. Penn State should win this game based on roster talent, and by roster talent I don't mean recruiting because that would favor Oregon. I'm talking about factoring in development in that, based on seniority, based on returning production and experience, the home field environment, the travel. Penn State should win this game. People have talked about how Ohio State's a must-win for James Franklin, and I think it is this year. But I think this game's even more of a must-win because it's a home game against a team that does not have the same mental or historic edge over you that the Buckeyes do, and it's kind of a spot for revenge as well. And Ohio State's already ahead of Penn State in the sense that Penn State hasn't beaten them since 2016. Ohio State has currently won 17, 18, 19, 20, 1, 2, 3, 4. They've won 8 games in a row. 8 games in a row against Penn State. They have. So don't let Oregon get a streak on you. Don't let them get a leg up on you in the Big Ten as Ohio State has already had. And it's the first game. You want to start off Big Ten Conference play with some momentum. I think this is the most important game for Penn State football this year. I also think, factoring in everyone coming back, Aller, Singleton, Denai Dennis Sutton, A.J. Harris, plenty of other starters, the portal additions they got, the hiring of Knowles, retaining Kotelnicki. This is the most important game of the James Franklin era at Penn State, I would say dating all the way back to probably 2017 against Ohio State, when Penn State entering that game looked like the better team and when they almost won and they had an opportunity to actually get a win streak against Ohio State. Not just one win that could be a flash in a pan, but a consistent win streak. I think this game is that important because this game could be the difference between Penn State going 11-1 or 12-0, reaching the Big Ten, definitely getting a home playoff spot, or going 10-2, or maybe they go 11-1, but now instead of only Ohio State having the historic edge on you in recent memory, you have another program in Oregon who is ahead of you recruiting-wise, like Ohio State is, and now has kind of a reputation of beating you built up. I don't know if that makes much sense. Hopefully it does, because I think it makes sense. Penn State is not ahead of Ohio State as a program right now, and they don't want to fall further behind. And if Oregon wins this game, Oregon could use that to get a leg up and to further separate themselves in Penn State, as Oregon entered the Big Ten as a comparable program to Penn State, and then I would say passed them, winning the Big Ten, earning the head-to-head. You get the point. This is a very important game, which is why I like the fact that it's going to be a whiteout. It's going to be very entertaining. Early on, very early on, Penn State should win. I would favor them to win this game. The matchups favor Penn State. The experience favors Penn State. Penn State scored 37 points and ran for nearly 300 yards last year, and they return about 2/3 of their production, while Oregon returns around 40% of their production. And Oregon's a very young team. Oregon's a lot like Ohio State and Notre Dame and some of these other teams where they could bring almost everyone back in 2026. Meanwhile, Penn State's this very old team that's going to be replacing a lot of starters and key characters in the 2026 season. So Penn State should win. They have to win. It's a must-win for James Franklin, I think his most important game in quite some time. I'm happy that it's a whiteout, and let me know if you're a Penn State fan or Oregon fan whether you're going to go to this game, because I would certainly love to. We'll just have to see whether I can or not. Thanks for watching. I will see you guys very soon. Have a great day, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to receive more college football coverage. Thanks.